This is John Howell Essential Cuts, your daily rundown of the best from today's show on 890 WLS.
I thought this was a good movie. Sandra Bullock starred in it. Tim McGraw with a brand new toupee starred in this. It was called The Blind Side. It came out a number of years ago, and it was a very, very heartwarming story.
He's been enrolled in 7 different institutions, including a gap of 18 months around the age of 10, when he apparently didn't attend school at all.
I tell you, most kids with his background wouldn't come within 200 miles of this place.
Class, this is Mike Oher, and he's new here, so I expect you all to make him feel welcome.
Hi. Smile at him and let them know you're their friend.
So, Michael Oher, the former NFL tackle, known for the movie The Blind Side, is now sued, essentially, the family who saved him.
Michael's grades have improved enough that he can go out for spring football in March.
1, 2, 3. This team is your family, Michael. When you look at him, you think of me, how you have my back. Are you going to protect the family, Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
SJ, you're going to want to get this.
All right, let's get some details now. Brian Clark is following this on behalf of ABC News. He's in New York. Brian, thanks so much. What exactly is Mr. Oher alleging here?
Thanks for having me. Michael Oher is alleging that in 2004, not long after he moved in with the Toohey family, he's saying they tricked him into signing documents that were not to adopt him, but to enter into a conservatorship. And he says that because of that, ever since then, the Tooheys have made money off of his story, like with the Blind Side movie, with the book, and they've enriched themselves just giving talks and writing their own books about this whole thing. And he's saying that he never saw the money. They've seen the money, and they're profiting off his name, and that he was tricked into essentially signing over the rights to his name and image.
So he was in the NFL for a number of years. He must have made some money. Why the legal action now?
That's a good question. The court filing, it was filed yesterday in Tennessee, and it said that he only discovered that there was a significant difference in terms of what he signed in February of this year, saying that he was always focused on playing football. So he knew that he had signed this document, but he claims that he was told that it was just it was a matter of semantics. It was essentially the same thing. He only says that he realized this year that it was substantially different, and that's where he's saying he's now embarrassed and he feels ripped off, and this is why he is suing now. So that is one of the questions that I think is going to have to be answered as we move forward on this.
So he's 37 years old now. He signed this document when he was 18, shortly after he turned 18, as you mentioned, back in 2004. Where is he now?
He's retired as an NFL player. He's married with a family and living his post-football life, and this now seems to be something that's taken up a big part of this. The relationship with the Toohey family, I think, had started to have some problems over the years. Ever since the movie came out, he was open that he did not like how he was portrayed in the movie. He says that, and even the Tooheys have said that in the movie he kind of comes off as somebody who's not very intelligent, not very bright. And the Tooheys have said themselves that was not the case. That was a bit of Hollywood. But he said that it hurt him in the NFL. He said he entered the league, and there was this perception of him as a guy who was not very smart, not very intelligent. So there's been some issues in that relationship for a while, but this is certainly an escalation.
Brian, the movie grossed over $300 million. What kind of money do we know did the Tooheys take away from that? And if so, how much did Mr. Oher take away from that?
Well, that's the big question here. So what Oher says is that the Tooheys and their kids got a combined $1 million, or just shy of $1 million, plus 2.5% of net proceeds, and like you said, $300 million. So that's a lot of money. He says he got none of it. The Tooheys have not filed a formal legal response yet, but what they're saying, what they're telling some local publications in Memphis, is that they got a small flat fee for the movie, and they got money from the book that was written by Michael Lewis that the movie was based off of. So they're saying they didn't get as much money as Oher is saying. He wants a full accounting of all the money. He wants a piece, and he wants the conservatorship ended and them to stop using his name and his story.
I forgot that Michael Lewis wrote the book.
That's another interesting element here. And his coach in high school, Michael Oher, is Hugh Freeze, who's now the new coach at Auburn University. He's coached at Ole Miss. So there's a lot of people who are still very prominent in the world who are maybe didn't do anything wrong, but are certainly going to face some questions about this as well.
You mentioned that the Tooheys have some sort of foundation, and does she work as a motivational speaker?
She does, and Michael Oher is essentially saying that's part of this whole thing where they were very wealthy beforehand, but he's saying that she's able to promote herself as the woman that Sandra Bullock won an Oscar playing in the movie about me to make more money, to enrich themselves further. So, yes.
Is Michael Lewis dragged into this too or not? Just the financials? Just
the Tuohys, yeah. We have not heard anything from or about Michael Lewis as of now.
What's the timetable on this? What happens next?
We just wait for the Tuohys to file their response, and then we see what happens from there in terms of whether they maybe come to some kind of agreement, whether this does go to trial or a judge will decide. So we just wait for the Tuohys to file their response.
And I know this isn't really part of your report, and I don't mean to sandbag you with this, but how good of a player was Michael Oher in the NFL?
He was pretty good. He was a first-round pick. He won a Super Bowl. He was not a superstar. Probably not, he was not one of the better offensive linemen in the league, but he was a serviceable player for a couple of years. I think the question is just when you draft somebody in the first round, you probably want more than serviceable, but he was not a bust.
He was no Keith Van Horn is what you're saying.
That's a good one, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's 85 Bear reference, Brian. I don't expect you to get it. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Have a great day. Thanks for bringing us up to date.
Thank you.
As Brian mentioned, here's Michael Oher talking about how he was disappointed in how he was portrayed in the movie.
I think the biggest for me is, being portrayed, not being able to read or write. Second grade, I was doing plays in front of the school. And I think that's one of the, when you go into a locker room and your teammates don't think you can learn a playbook, that weighs heavy.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
Reading from my next guest piece, which I saw at thehill.com. He is a Dream Team Republican consultant out of Pennsylvania. He's co-founder of Silent Majority Strategies. Keith Naughton will pop on in just a second. As he wrote, the headline, Biden's lack of strategy on Ukraine could put Donald Trump back in the White House. I imagine Keith would be pretty happy about that. But as he wrote, America is fast approaching the strangest, most absurd presidential election in history. Never before have the main political parties been poised to nominate such thoroughly disliked candidates. Yet both Biden and Trump have little serious competition at this point. While much of the commentary has been focused on, what else is new, Donald Trump, little attention has been paid to the very, very rough road Biden faces. Biden's approval numbers are terrible, underwater, approximately 13 points. At the heart of the matter is that the Biden administration has all the appearances of a loose coalition of policy and entrepreneurs, special interests, and factions. That's true of all presidencies to some extent, but this White House, their lack of control over major policy is quite glaring. Keith, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. What are the prime examples in your mind of this disarray in the Biden White House?
Well, I think you see it a little bit in domestic policy. They talk about the green economy and how we've got to make this electrification transition, yet we're not allowed to mine any of the materials that you need for it. You've got Pete Buttigieg trying to tackle this, our air traffic control problems and our airline problems, or rather mismanage them. He's not seemed to be getting any help from the center there. I think this administration is very much at odds on domestic policy. But I think the worst thing is in our national security policy. This president doesn't seem to have any strategy whatsoever. It's pretty glaring in Ukraine. It's also pretty obvious in this recent coup in Niger, which is a huge problem for our policy in Africa.
Why do you suppose there's a lack of focus with international relations and strategy?
I think he's just got a team that's not coherent, that seems to be at odds with each other, and there's no referee. Either he's not forceful enough to referee these factions and say, look, this is what we're going to do and this is where we're headed, or he doesn't have a chief of staff who's going to do it. Usually it's one of those two people who exert the control and make sure there's some type of coherent policy.
So we've provided a huge amount of significant military and financial aid to Ukraine, but as you write, there seems to be a lack of strategy. In fact, you think it's an overall strategic vacuum from one end of the earth to the other.
Well, I think it definitely is. I mean, what's our end goal there? We don't seem to have any end goal. We don't seem to have any process or any thought about how they're going to win there or what winning looks like. It sort of looks like Iraq all over again, only we don't have troops on the ground, so I guess that's an improvement. But we seem to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And the big problem now is Russia is adapting. I think they just recently had an attack where over half their missiles got through. Sanctions are getting leakier all the time. American or chips from American companies are being found in missiles being produced today. And there's no sign that state is cracking. There isn't going to be a popular revolution in Russia. There hasn't been a successful one in 500 years. You're going to have to win this on the battlefield.
Keith Naughton is here. He's a longtime Republican political consultant. We're talking about Ukraine. There's $300 billion in frozen Russian assets. Is it time to liquidate those and use them for our own purposes?
Absolutely. In fact, the time to do it was yesterday. It's really beyond belief to me that we haven't tapped into those funds. This administration is not focused on American public opinion, and that's really one of the things that sticks in the craw of Americans is we're sending this money over there. We have problems here. That's been a constant problem with foreign aid for decades. Meanwhile, there's this $300 billion sitting out there, and there's probably more to be found, and we're not touching it. And it's beyond me that you can't make that move, because that would really solve the problem with American public opinion. Just real quick, NATO and all those European countries, quite frankly, don't count for anything. American public opinion counts for everything because we're the only ones who can provide the adequate amount of military aid to keep Ukraine in the ballgame there.
What do you make of the Republican Party now being essentially tipping away from intervention and being kind of our interest in the rest of the world ends at the shore? We don't want to provide Ukraine with unlimited aid. Are you concerned about that as a longtime Republican strategist?
I think that's a very significant concern. And I think there was very strong unanimity for about a year. And most Republicans, very few Republicans in Congress voted against aid for the first several packages. So I think it was very strong and very robust. But you've got to keep making the case that this makes sense, that this is a sensible investment of our tax dollars, and that there's a real strategy out there and a reason to be behind it. And now that's cracking mostly on the Republican side. And quite frankly, the opponents have somewhat of a point in that you've got to have a strategy. You've got to explain why we're doing things. And that's not being done. You've got to sell that case.
Keith, I know you're into Pennsylvania politics big time, obviously, but has your outfit, Silent Majority Strategies, are you behind any of the declared Republican candidates for president?
No, we're not. We're not working for them, no.
Any anticipation of getting in?
No, we work on sort of regulatory and permitting issues. We try to help companies get through the red tape to get their projects done. That's what we focus on.
Think anybody can catch Trump?
I think it's going to be tough. I think right now everyone's just kind of shut off on the Republican side, especially his supporters. We'll see what happens as the months go on and you get closer to the primaries and caucuses. The primary system isn't done on one day. It's a serial event, and Trump is doing worse in Iowa and New Hampshire than he is nationally. So if somebody can break through in Iowa, that might change things, but it is going to be a challenge.
Keith Naughton, nice talking with you again. We'll check back in a couple weeks.
Thanks, John.
This is John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
Alex Isenstadt is a longtime reporter for Politico, and basically he's been tasked with covering all the nonsense at the Iowa State Fair. And we talked yesterday about a kerfuffle, a brouhaha, a Donnybrook that broke out between, I think, some DeSantis Super PAC people and some Donald Trump supporters in a bar. And I believe I've been to this bar, the Copper Cup in Des Moines. Perhaps I recognize that. But this was happening not only at bars and taverns throughout Iowa, and not just Des Moines, but at almost every stop at the Iowa State Fair in Des Moines. Let's welcome Alex Isenstadt back for some details. Alex, did this ever get fully out of hand? Were the police involved, or this was just basically a lot of shouting and maybe shoving and everybody went their own way?
No, there was no cops involved, and there was nothing physical. It was just a lot of alcohol involved and a lot of words involved, some raised voices, but nothing physical, and no law enforcement presence.
Why do any of the other Republican contenders, DeSantis, Pence, Scott, Haley, why do they even bother going to the Iowa State Fair? I understand why Iowa in particular demands that they go to all 99 counties. I get that. But why, when Donald Trump is such an overwhelming presence, why show up? Because you're just going to get heckled.
Well, look, I mean, the point is a fair one, but you've got to try, right? If you're not trying, how do you succeed? And these guys got to make an effort, and if you're going to stop Donald Trump, it starts in Iowa, right? And Iowa may be the first and last chance to stop him. So, the stakes are especially high for someone like Ron DeSantis. DeSantis, at this point, is putting all his eggs in the state of Iowa. And the Iowa State Fair it's a big event. It's a mainstay on the primary or caucus calendar, the nominating calendar. And so it's where people are going to be.
This may be before your time, but I distinctly remember when Ronald Reagan was running for president, this was 1980, and he went to New York City. Not exactly friendly territory for the former governor of California, but he actually went to Harlem. And at that point, he was heckled, and he turned and had one of those moments that you either can capitalize on as a politician or they just pass you by, your moment, where he said, for me to be able to help you, you have to elect me first. And it turned out to ricochet around. This is pre-internet and everything else, but pre-cable news. But it actually turned out to be a moment for him. So I guess to your point, DeSantis had his opportunity. Nikki Haley had her opportunity. Others had their opportunity. But you better step into the arena and see if you can land a punch.
Yeah, and look, I mean, DeSantis is clearly the number 2 candidate in this race, but he struggled to emerge as a sufficiently dynamic political performer, right? Donald Trump is a monster. Whatever you think about Donald Trump, he is a monster of a political candidate. And DeSantis has had a hard time going toe-to-toe with him. And you're right, there's a very much performative element of this. And DeSantis has struggled to fill the shoes of someone who needs to be big enough to take on Donald Trump. It hasn't happened yet. Now, there are 5 months to go until the caucus, and there's still time, but in a lot of ways, the calendar is starting to run shorter and shorter by the day.
The only guy that I can think of that has the rhetorical chops to take on Trump is Chris Christie. He's going to make it on the stage for the debate in Milwaukee. I know that. But other than a couple of big donors, he can buy some TV commercials, but he can't insert himself anywhere near Donald Trump. And I don't think Donald Trump is ever going to get on a stage with Chris Christie. Your thoughts?
No, I think you're probably right. Trump is unlikely by all indications to attend next week's debate in Milwaukee, which is the first debate. He's all but ruled out attending the second debate, which is going to be held in September at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California. So right there, that makes it pretty hard for someone like Chris Christie, because what the RNC is doing is, and the Republican National Committee, they are making it harder for each candidate to go to each successive debate. They're raising the threshold for polling thresholds and for number of donors needed to get onto the debate stage. And so if Donald Trump doesn't attend the first 2 debates, it's hard to see how someone like Chris Christie, who has been willing to take the bark to Trump, actually gets on the same debate stage as him, at least at this point.
The other thing you could do is maybe bushwhack Donald Trump at some event, but that's fraught with danger as well.
Yeah, it gets tough, right? I mean, we're talking about stunts here, and when you're pulling stunts, it doesn't bode well for your chances. It doesn't speak highly of your chances, right? I mean, Ron DeSantis, for example, is going to do a debate, or is expected to do a debate with Gavin Newsom in November, the California Democratic governor. And, if DeSantis was really feeling strong about his prospects in his primary, would he be, signing on to do a debate with the Democratic governor of California? It looks a little bit like a stunt, right?
Especially if, as Newsom is insisting, no live audience, because Why would you do that? You don't even split the audience. And Newsom, doesn't he want DeSantis or himself to have any notes? This will be a Sean Hannity moderated debate between two guys on a stage with zero audience. I mean, that's what I'd like to watch. To me, that's far more informative than, a circus act. But I think DeSantis is reticent to do that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And also, let's see if this debate actually happens, right? I mean, DeSantis could have a lot to lose. Newsom is pretty good on his feet. Would he want to really debate Newsom and fall short, especially on Fox News? Could be a black eye for DeSantis. But then again, if DeSantis is behind, continues to trail Trump by large margins, maybe he'll feel like he has nothing to lose.
Well, by November, will he still even be in it?
Well, it's a fair question, right? But DeSantis is still raising money, and, no one's really been able to eclipse him as the second-choice candidate. I mean, you have Vivek Ramaswamy, who's, he's inching up a little bit in the polls, but he doesn't seem to have quite overtaken DeSantis just yet.
What you mentioned Donald Trump's natural political chops. In your years of looking at politics, have you ever seen anybody that, we've heard how talented Bill Clinton was in walking into a room and kind of making it his own. Even Rick Perry, who I saw work rooms full of donors, and he was very charismatic. I always called him Dash Riprock, the former Texas governor. But have you ever seen anybody be able to command a stage, even at age 77, like Donald Trump?
He's a political force, right? And he is someone who has an incredible ability to connect to his supporters, his base of support. There is a visceral connection he has with his voters, his supporters. And it's something that separates him from the rest of the candidates in this race. You don't see those candidates who are able to elicit that kind of connection. It's just not something that's happened yet, and that's been a problem for them.
Seems so odd to me because I don't think Donald Trump would last 10 minutes in a Chicago tavern, honestly. Just his upbringing and, the way he comports himself. I just don't see Trump as being a guy that can relate to a regular guy, and yet that's his base.
Yeah, look, I mean, he has kind of cast himself effectively so as this blue-collar billionaire. Through his rhetoric, to the way he comports himself, he has defined himself. He has really defined himself as someone who can connect with blue-collar voters, people who feel disconnected from the elites in Washington and elsewhere, who feel like they have been left behind. Trump plays to those people. He connects with those people in a way that other candidates simply can't.
And what a business model to say, I'm the one standing between the deep state and them indicting you. They're indicting me because I'm stopping them from indicting you.
And it shows, and that messaging has really helped Trump benefit politically, at least in the primary. It has helped him benefit politically from these four different indictments that are really quite threatening to him. From a legal perspective, he's, at least in the primary, been able to turn into political advantage.
Yeah, although it's cost him a fortune in legal fees.
It's true. It's cost him a fortune in legal fees, and that could have an impact on the amount of money that he's able to raise to actually be able to spend on his campaign.
Now, some of the donor class, some have abandoned Trump now and said, okay, I'm going to put my money behind DeSantis. Even one particularly deep-pocketed donor here in Chicago has put money behind Chris Christie. Do they eventually say, all right, you're at Donald Trump and put money behind him, or are they done the traditional Republican country club donor class?
Well, Trump has never really done particularly well among big donors, especially that country club class that you referred to. Is it possible that those donors stop giving to those other candidates like Chris Christie or Ron DeSantis because those guys are, trailing by significant margins in polls and they don't want to throw good money after bad? That's possible. That's more likely than them getting behind Donald Trump and putting money there.
Did you happen to see Jonah Goldberg yesterday say that the biggest threat to the continuation of American democracy are small donors?
I saw those remarks. That was interesting. Not quite sure what to make of that.
Yeah, well, there's a bit of a class divide there. I think that I think that people that support Donald Trump have put Jonah Goldberg in that elite category now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, there is a divide, right? And Trump does very well among small donors. He does less well among big donors.
Yeah. Alex Isenstadt, thanks for popping on. Much appreciated. Hope to have you back in a couple weeks. We'll read more at Politico.com.
Thank you.
Take care.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
A couple times a month, we like to check in with Steve Burness, President and CEO of the Better Business Bureau of Chicago and Northern Illinois, about what scams to watch out for, the tip-off to the rip-off, if you will. Even if you won't, he will. And Steve, welcome back to Double L. So I want to start, and I thought this is great advice. Families should create a code word that you can utilize if you think you're involved in a hacking or a scam.
That's right, John. Thank you so much for having me today. You know, without a doubt, this is really the scariest type of scam I've seen in my 36-year career at the BBB. It really has the potential to affect millions of people and scam them. And basically what it is that these AI technology has advanced so far that they really only need a few seconds of your voice from maybe a video on your home on your social media sites to make it sound like you're talking in a conversation, so they can grab this information and make a audio file of you, and they can call your loved one saying that you're in dire need, you've been arrested or injured, and that you need money quickly. And we all seen these grandparent scams, as we used to call them in the past, and now these scammers are using AI technology, and this is really the scariest scam I've seen in my career.
So in other words, you got to say, okay, if you're ever in real need, I'm going to ask you for a code word, whatever that code word could be, and you have to provide the code word, and hopefully the AI would not have picked up any hints of that.
Exactly. That's why you want to share with your family members, and obviously not through emails or anything like that. Just a code word. It could be anything what you want it to be. So if you are in trouble, your parents, godparents, grandparents can say the word, and you ask you the code word, and then they'll know it's you exactly. We heard from many consumers where they say that AI voice sound and the technology of the audio sounds just like the person. They've been fooled. So it's only going to get better, John. It's the advancement in technology, and this scam is going to be used a lot on a lot of people. So please, family members, create a code word and don't share it with anybody else.
How do we decide which organization to donate to regarding Maui?
That's a difficult decision, John, because there's so many great organizations out there. We do have a list on the BBB website. It's give.org. That's our special website that we have for our charitable foundations. But you really got to review the clarity of these appeals and look for experience in disaster relief. And most organizations want money rather than goods. But unfortunately, there's going to be scammers out there who are going to take advantage of the situation, any natural disaster, where they create these fake charities. So, give, but give wisely, John, and do the research on a charity. A great charity will want your money today, tomorrow, next year. They're not going to want it in 20 minutes or less and ask for your credit card and demand it. So be careful and check them out and see what their report is with the Better Business Bureau on charity standards. We have 20 specific charity standards that we ask charities adhere to.
Steve Burness is here, President and CEO of the BBB of Chicago and Northern Illinois. Kim Gordon?
Past 2 hours, President Biden has approved FEMA help here on the south side and in Cook County, where people suffered all the issues from flooding. And, during the press conference, they were warning about people beware of scammers because they're going to come, as great it is that they're getting federal help. There is there is a chance that scammers could beware too. What advice do you have for people to make sure they're not getting scammed?
That's a great point, Kim, as well. The scammers always come out of the woodwork, any type of disaster. And so we want consumers to do the research on the entity, and somebody knocking at your door saying they're from the government or they were sent by the government to help you and assist you. You never answer your door to the first person that comes to, or do business with them, rather, because you got to do your checking on them, and you always want 2 or 3 bids anyway. So people are going to take advantage of the situation. They're going to say they're endorsed by the government or they're here sent by them in some way, and that's usually not the case, and it's usually the sign that you tip off to the ripoff, Kim.
Mr. Burness, thank you very much for your time. As always, sir, we'll check out more at bbb.org for the tip-off to the ripoff, and we'll talk to you again in a couple weeks.
Thank you so much, John. Have a good day.
Steve Burness joining us here on Double DLS.
John Howell, Essential Cuts. Check back every weekday for another episode of John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.